Okay, so I literally just made this channel and just made this video because I had to discuss this movie, and I knew the discourse on this would be tea. Like, I knew that it would be a good film to discuss, even before I saw it, but I also had a feeling that the internet would not treat it with the nuance that it needed, and I was spot on. Like, you ever go see a movie and then you like go on the internet, like you can't discuss it with anybody because your friends haven't seen it yet. You go on the internet and you're like, wow, like let me see what the masses are saying about this film, and you just see like the most like unnuanced, horrible very uninformed takes. Yeah, that's what I just experienced. So I am gonna make a video about this. I am gonna be going ahead and making this video. But before I go any further, I do want to give a big fat spoiler warning for this, because I do feel like this is the type of movie where spoilers matter quite a lot. And that's because I do feel like the movie deals a lot with preconceived notions and perception. I think that's a huge theme of the film. And not so, like, yes, the perception of the characters in the movie, but especially the audience's perception. I think that's a huge theme that the movie is playing with. And so, yeah, if you haven't seen it, definitely dip out. Also, of course, like, trigger warning for sensitive content. I can't reveal any more without spoiling it. But trigger warning for sensitive content. Yeah, not for the faint of heart, I would say, this movie. But okay, with that out of the way, I guess I can just start with kind of like describing the plot, because there's a lot here, and, well, I don't even know. The movie's dealing with a lot, but the plot itself is actually rather simple. So essentially, it starts with this little meet cute, very typical, rom-com meet cute, but even from the meet cute of Robert Pattinson's character Charlie and Zendaya's character Emma, even from the meet cute, it's a little bit off. And if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. Like, it just has a little bit of like a sleazy vibe. I mean, their meet cute starts with a lie. The relationship is built on deception. Robert Pattinson lies about having read a book that Emma was reading, and he finds out she's deaf, which he finds cute a little bit, and like interesting. And then in the movie, essentially we go from that meet cute, they show us like the first date where he confesses to having lied about reading the book. It fast forwards 2 years into the relationship, and they're engaged. They're very, very near getting married. And they're at a tasting for their wedding. And everybody goes around and says the worst things that they've done. And it's framed as like, oh, this is something that you need to do before you get married. Like, you need to go into the marriage knowing the worst thing that the person has done, and then like commit to them anyway, as a sign of, I don't even know, like as a sign of how complete your commitment is, I guess. And it's kind of lighthearted, but even from jump, it's a little bit dark. Zendaya's character Emma reveals that she planned a goddamn school shooting when she was 15 years old. Now, me, as a zillennial child of the internet, I immediately clocked this as femso core. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. But I was curious, how far at that point the movie would go with it. Like, how much would they delve into that, and how much would Zendaya delve into it in this little dinner. And they kind of like drag it out a little bit. Like, I don't know. It feels like that scene was like 30 minutes long, because it is extremely well directed, and you're like on the edge of your seat because you're trying to figure out, okay, like, she planned it, but she stopped. Why did she stop? How far did she go? What was she willing to do? All that stuff. Why is like the big, I think why is like the big unanswered question of the movie. But anyway, ultimately, Emma says that she planned out the school shooting. Again, reminder, she's 15. She planned out the school shooting. She had recorded a manifesto, everything. She practiced with the gun, with the rifle, her dad's rifle, brought the gun to school, but stopped because she got upstaged by another nearby mass shooting. when I tell you the non-American mind cannot conceive of children like fighting it out to get like the murder spotlight, like they cannot conceive of it. But yeah, like that's the reason that she gives for why she did not go through with it, is that she got essentially upstaged by another really bad mass shooting. And so for the rest of the movie, essentially we're just witnessing Robert Pattinson's guilt and confusion. And I mean, the film itself evolves into this like paranoid psychological horror situation where he's eaten alive. He's eaten alive both by the concept of what Emma was willing to do and what Emma did do, which is take the gun to school, was fully ready to shoot up the school. But he's also tortured by the idea of like throwing away all that love, all that, like all those years, all those memories, the whole relationship and everything that a relationship with somebody contains. And so he's kind of being squished by those two forces, very understandably so. And we just kind of watch him grapple with it for the rest of the movie. And I think this is such an interesting film because there's multiple layers at play here. Of course, you know, like the most obvious one is, should you or are you obligated to divulge the worst things you've done before getting married? Because there's a huge part of this movie where when Emma is humanized, when we do kind of get to see or like witness secondhand Emma's experience of this and how horrible it is for her, it is kind of like she obviously just regrets it. Like she just like, it's just her life would have gone on completely normally. We assume if she just hadn't admitted this to anybody, because nobody else in the world knew that this had happened. And then two, another layer at play is how redeemable is somebody after doing something really fucking bad, especially after planning a mass shooting. Like, how redeemable can somebody be? Like, because there's a ceiling to it for each of us, right? You know, how redeemable can somebody be? And then three, could you forgive? Could you forgive if you were Robert Pattinson, if your significant other right now, whoever you're dating, whoever you have a crush on, if you found out that they had planned a mass shooting but didn't do it, could you forgive that? And is it even a matter of forgiveness? Is it a matter of like trust being broken? Is it a matter of not being able to move past? Is there a part of you that actually is afraid for your safety? Because you know that they were at one point, at least they thought they were capable of this. You don't know if they're capable of it or not, but they thought that they were capable of that at one time. And then lastly, as the perpetrator of the crime, you know, if you're the Emma in this situation, what things can you be rehabilitated from and what things can you not? Or can you get so close to doing something so horrible where you're just cooked to the point of no return and you just got too close to doing this horrible thing and you just cannot come back from it, but you never did it? You know, like, I don't know. There's a lot of scary questions in that. But of course, you know, for me, the most interesting part of this movie is the school shooter aspect. Now, before the movie came out, I was eating up the viral marketing, okay? I was eating it up. I am a Zendaya stan. Love Zendaya. And I was eating up all the marketing. And of course, you know, I was discussing with everybody who would listen, what do you think she did? Like, what is the bad thing that she revealed? Because I saw the trailer. What is the bad thing she revealed at this dinner party? Like, what could she have done that would make somebody react this way, make her friends, make her husband, her future husband react that way? And what is so interesting is that everybody I talked to gave a different answer, of course, but they were all, I would say, on par with school shooting, you know, like they were all around that level. And so I don't know, like going into it made me think like, yeah, like the school shooter aspect is what this movie is about, but there's so many other horrible things that humans are capable of, as we all know. And because we know how many victims there are of so many horrible things that humans do in the world, we know that there's a whole lot of perpetrators. We know there's a whole lot of violent people. We know there's a whole lot of evil people in this world. But anyway, getting back to the school shooting aspect. As an American, for us, school shootings are more than commonplace. They are more than common. They're everyday affairs. They are everyday affairs. Like, they're things that, like, I'm telling you, for most of us, like, I don't even know. Like, I think that a lot of us are honestly desensitized to it at this point. Not that we think that, like, they're not bad, but it's just you hear about them so frequently now that I think it's changed. I don't know. Like, I'm sure it's changed something in our psyches because it's like it's a part of American life. It's a part of the American reality. And looking at the data for the statistics of school shootings and how frequent and common they are, again, very commonplace event for Americans. Non-Americans, y'all aren't gonna know. Y'all are not gonna understand when I say what I mean when I say this. Maybe you will. Maybe you will when you look at the statistics yourselves. But like, looking at those statistics, you have to know that planning a school shooting must also be very common. Obviously, more common than the shootings themselves. There's got to be a lot of would-be school shooters out there amongst us. You have to know they're out there. You may know one yourself. But if you found out that your fiance was one of them, then what? What do you do? And it's, 4 days before your wedding. Then what? And then also what's so fascinating is why she stopped. Again, at the little wedding tasting, she said that she stopped because she was upstage, essentially, which implies that she wanted infamy and a spotlight. But it's hard to tell if she truly had a change of heart. And I think they do leave it ambiguous on purpose. I wouldn't be shocked if others have, a very different interpretation of this part of the movie. But it's very hard to tell if she truly had a change of heart where she got to the school and realized, you know what? Actually, this is wrong. I don't want to kill my classmates. This is really not a good idea. Never mind, yada, yada, yada. That's very much ambiguous. We do not see that explicitly in this film. Instead, we get, this nice emotional scene in the gym where a principal is giving a little bit of a sort of healing, come together type talk. But again, going back to the wedding tasting, when Emma was asked why she didn't go through with it, she simply said that it was because of the other shooting, And then a step further, she became a gun control advocate, which implies so many different things. That's a huge, huge hint or huge clue to somebody's capacity for deception. And I think that, when it comes to getting married, I think that deception is gotta be up there in terms of the top marriage fears, is being deceived, probably even more than the marriage failing, And so I don't know, there's layers to it. She did not have the classic, come to Jesus moment and then turned around, realized the error of her ways, rehabilitated herself. No, she stopped because she was upstaged and then became a gun control advocate. I don't know. And then also I wanted to discuss the race dynamic. So the race dynamic in this film, I think, is very interesting. Online, I saw some people saying that the race element isn't explored, and I understand why they would say that. But I feel like the race dynamic is implicit. I feel like there's a racial element here that's implicit. It's not, spelled out for us, but I feel like it's obviously there, especially when we consider the cast, the full cast of this movie. I definitely think it's there. What I think was kind of the key piece of dialogue in my mind for this movie is when Emma says, it's very casual, very fast, but towards the beginning of the movie, she says, "I used to be ugly." Again, femcel core shit. I think it's very fascinating because there are girls out there who are just as alienated by beauty standards as male incels believe they are. Okay, let me not gaslight the male incels because some of them really are genuinely alienated I mean, like there are people in general that are, of course, genuinely alienated by beauty standards, and of course, there are male incels who are some of those people that are genuinely alienated by beauty standards, and of course, there are women that experience the same thing, and that alienation can absolutely sometimes lead people down, the same kind of radicalization pipeline that we see with the manosphere. And when I say people, I mean girls in this case, can lead girls down the same radicalization pipeline as we see with the manosphere, just on the feminine side of things. And I definitely think the movie implies that's kind of where she was at, especially when she mentioned, that guns and gun violence and all that stuff was very popular online. Again, fellow zillennial children of the internet, y'all know exactly what kind of spaces she's talking about. And I also think a big part of this with the "I used to be ugly" line is the biracial aspect with the white mom. I always think it's interesting, in movies, how they decide whether or not to make the characters Zendaya plays biracial the way that she is. And if they do, whether they make the mom or the dad white. I think is very fascinating. And really somebody could do a think piece just on that alone. But I think that, there's layers here. Now, I myself am not biracial, but as somebody who grew up around a lot of biracial kids, especially girls who had a white mom, sometimes, not always, but sometimes being brown and being raised by a white woman, especially if your mom is the only woman that's really around, can really fuck with people's self-image on so many different levels. Like, I can't get into everything now. I mean, there's so many levels to it, but I think it can really fuck with people. And I think that even more than like the beauty standards themselves not aligning with your self concept or your image of yourself, there's a huge level of social isolation that can sometimes come with being biracial if you're either not around a lot of other biracial kids or accepted by the communities that you happen to find yourself in at the moment. I think it's very interesting how, Emma she ended up growing up in Louisiana, at least at this point in her life. She's in Louisiana. And of course, if you know anything about U.S. geography, the population dynamic of the states in the U.S., Louisiana does have a lot of very, very mixed people, especially fair-skinned Black people who look like Zendaya, There's a lot of them in Louisiana. But you'll notice in the movie that we don't see her hanging out with any of them, at least not that I remember. We really see her mostly hanging out with white people. I think it's very fascinating. And then, of course, it's implied in the flashbacks to her high school years that her parents really were not around. And so, yeah, I think the social isolation is a huge, huge part of like the racial dynamic and a huge part of the school shooter aspect, of course. Lastly, the last thing about this race dynamic thing is that I think that it creates so much audience skepticism because she doesn't fit the profile. We know that in the US, Black girls don't do school shootings. And that alone, even without hearing anything else, even without hearing any flashbacks, any explanation, any analysis, even without hearing anything else, it creates so much skepticism within the audience. Like, we really, I don't know, like, it's hard to believe, and it puts us in the same shoes as Charlie, her fiance, who also doesn't believe it at first, just because, again, she doesn't seem like the person who would do that kind of thing. And I do feel like perceptions and preconceived notions, aka profiling, is another big theme of this movie. We use profiling as a tool, as a shorthand to navigate the social world that we live in, because knowing everything about anybody is just not possible. Like, it's just not practical, not possible. And we use profiling as a way to like quickly navigate social situations, as a way to form, I don't even know, as a way to keep ourselves safe, as a way to make things easier. And often it goes horribly wrong, and often it's unethical, you know? But I think that's a huge part of this movie, is the fact that Emma doesn't fit the profile. And even though she didn't go through with the shooting in the end, it's deeply shocking because she does not fit the race or gender profile of an American school shooter. And the last thing I'm going to talk about, as it relates to the school shooter thing again, is that her friends really hone in on this idea that, that she was a psychopath all along, that she was a secret psychopath all along. And that's what really freaks him out the most. But I think what's interesting is that we never actually see anything to corroborate that idea. We don't see her do anything strange. There's some flashback scenes that Robert's remembering where she's aggressive in public, she was aggressive with him too in that one scene. But I mean, it's like, was that a sign of anything, or was that just normal aggression? On the whole, Emma just seems like a regular person who was isolated, had violent thoughts like most humans do, if not all humans, and acted on them. And it would be so much easier to write her off if she was a psychopath, or if they had hinted to that, if she had been this boogeyman type villain in the film. But she's not. She just isn't. And so to give my take on the movie itself, if I had to give a review of it, I think it was great. I think it's a great film. I think it's an excellent discussion movie. I think that everybody should go see this with a group of friends if possible, because I think there's so much to say. I think everybody's gonna have something very, very different that they experience in this movie. The only thing I would say is that in some ways it did feel a little bit underdeveloped. I almost think that it would have been better as a short film, or as a 1 hour film, maybe a short film that was a short film that had all the emotional roller coasters, but maybe compacted into a shorter runtime. I think that almost could have been more jarring and emotionally effective. And then also, I think that the dramatic tension in the film would have been much stronger and more effective if they had played the flashbacks to Emma's childhood totally straight and not for laughs at all. And while I do think that this is a wonderful dark comedy, and I think it's so refreshing to get a good dark comedy, I think that it would have made the movie scarier, more, I don't know, more disturbing if the flashbacks to Emma's childhood were darker and more, I don't even know, more harsh, more brutal, and if there were no laughs in the flashbacks. I also think it would have been more interesting if they hadn't given us as much information as they did. They showed a little bit of bullying, for instance. And I think that they either should have not shown the bullying and let us kind of fill in the blanks for what happened to Emma in her childhood, or I think they should have shown more horrific bullying, because literally all we saw was somebody shoving her and then somebody called her stinky. Let's be so for real. Let's be so for real. My take of it is that something worse happened. Something worse happened to Emma in her childhood. That just wasn't shown. Maybe it was cut out of the movie. Maybe it was too dark. Who knows? Maybe it didn't make the cut. But yeah, I think they should have either left it ambiguous and let us fill in the blanks, because we all know that imagination can create more horrifying things than what can be put to screen. So I think that would have been more interesting. But overall, excellent film, of course. I think the performances are excellent. Robert Pattinson is firing on all cylinders as expected. Zendaya is excellent. I think the way Zendaya can crumble into herself is just absolutely amazing. And I find it so interesting. And incredibly entertaining to watch too. But yeah, I'm gonna end it there. I know this was very long. Thank you for listening, and I don't know, maybe I'll do another one of these. We'll see. Bye.